This next session will be focused on self-service, multi-tenancy, and quota management. We'll show you how to use tenants to manage different organizations or teams that you may be serving, using roles to assign sets of privileges to users, and using quotas to control the amount of capacity available to different users and organizations. In OpenStack, self-service users are empowered to provision and manage cloud resources without any administrative bottleneck. With the multi-tenancy mechanisms in place, we can also ensure that these resources are securely shared amongst different users or departments. So let's explore the concepts of tenants and roles, which provide the framework for defining user permissions and resource allocation in OpenStack environments. Tenants, also known as projects, serve as a logical grouping of users. It allows users or groups to operate within their dedicated environments while maintaining isolation from other tenants. Tenants can have quotas associated with them that can limit things like the amount of CPU, memory, and storage that a group of users can consume. Roles, on the other hand, define the permissions and access levels granted to users within specific tenants. The two common roles are the administrator role and the self-service role. The administrator role is a super user of the OpenStack environment and has an unrestricted view and management of all resources across all tenants. Administrators have the ability to manage users, their associated roles, as well as the ability to manage the infrastructure of the OpenStack environment. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Self-service users, on the other hand, have restricted views that are limited to the tenant that they have been assigned to and are not able to access any other resources outside of their assigned tenants. Self-service users can do things such as build virtual machines based on the flavors and networks that have been configured. And while it's not a topic we're covering today, I do want to highlight that OpenStack can integrate with most common identity providers like Okta, ADFS, Google, Keycloak, as long as the identity provider is SAML 2.0 based. So when a user wants to access the OpenStack environment, they can log in through their identity provider and ultimately eliminating the need for anyone to manage yet another set of credentials. So what I'll be showing you next is creating a tenant and setting quotas. We'll create a self-service user, and then we'll log in as this newly created user. So currently I'm logged into the Platform 9 UI as an administrator. To create a tenant, click on the Tenants and Users section here, and then click Create New Tenant. I'm going to name this tenant Sales. And for quotas, I'm going to leave most of the options as the default values, but I do want to restrict this user from creating block storage volumes. So I'm going to go ahead and set the volume quota to 0. Click Next, and then Create Tenant. Now, let's create a self-service user and add them to that new project. So click on Users, Create New User, and let's give it a username. Here I have two options. I can send an activation email to the user, so that way they can set the password themselves, or I can set a password on their behalf. So I'm going to go ahead and set one, since I'll be logging into this shortly, and then I want to add this user to the sales tenant. When I click on the sales tenant, I have the option to provide this user with the administrator role, the self-service role, or the read-only role. I'm going to give them the self-service role, and then click Create User. Now let's log into the Platform 9 UI using the new credentials and see what the Platform 9 UI looks like from a self-service user perspective. The first thing I'll see is the dashboard, which highlights the current tenant's quota utilization. As you may notice, as a self-service user, I have fewer options available to me within the UI, such as I don't have the permissions to manage the infrastructure. Earlier, when I created the sales tenant, I set a quota for volumes to 0. So let's show you how that's enforced. Click on volumes, and let's try creating a new volume. You'll notice that whenever I attempt to create a volume in this tenant, I'll receive an error indicating that I have exceeded my quota of 0 for volumes.